Beyond Blue is, first and foremost, a work of passion. It's a game about diving beneath the waves, chilling out with whales and dolphins, and celebrating nature and just the joy of existing in it. But it's as much a documentary as it is a game. For every moment where Beyond Blue lets you swim alongside orcas, it takes another moment to try and tell you more about that ocean or why people love it so dearly.
These are animals with the biggest brain on Earth and the most powerful sonic apparatus.
And that final point is what I mean when I talk about Beyond Blue as a work of passion, because its greatest achievement is how it successfully captures that love and lets it show in almost every moment of its runtime. And as someone who already shares that love myself, I absolutely reveled in this game. So let's talk about why. As always, I'm Alex, and this is First 5, where I ask if games are worth your time, not your money. I played a game for 5 hours, and I'm gonna tell you if those were 5 hours well spent. And today we're swimming with whales in Beyond Blue. Before we get too deep into the review, I did receive a free advance review copy of this game, so heads up. One thing that I've occasionally mentioned about myself is that I'm a recreational scuba diver, and it's surprisingly difficult to find any video games that actually capture the fun of that hobby, even among games that are entirely set underwater. In Other Waters, which I reviewed a few months ago, was much more interested in its hard sci-fi creation of an entire new ecosystem from scratch, and hand-waved a lot of the actual diving aspects. Subnautica, the big daddy indie game that people think about when associating games with underwater exploration, similarly has much more survival gameplay-centric concerns at the forefront of its mind. Beyond Blue is the first game I found since Abzu that actually embraces diving and the joy of exploring the ocean instead of merely using it as a vehicle for delivering a survival horror experience. Inspired by previous documentaries such as Blue Planet and attempting to strike a similar tone, Beyond Blue is the rare game that feels like it was made specifically for me. It's also made by the devs at Eline, who previously made Never Alone, a puzzle platformer that celebrated the cultural heritage of the Inupiat, the Alaskan Native American people. This is a game studio quickly building a track record of making games that are as much playable documentaries as they are video games, and treating their subject matter with genuine respect. And Beyond Blue is no different. And all of this is to say that I have been extremely excited about the prospect of this game, and this is my jam! Now, no video game is ever going to be able to replicate the feeling of actually being there in the ocean. Animals don't move the same, it would take a AAA budget just to animate little fish popping in and out of coral properly, and if you watch any individual fish for more than a few seconds, the illusion breaks pretty quickly as their animations start looping and become repetitive. Beyond Blue doesn't come close to truly capturing that experience. But what it does successfully capture is an abounding love for the ocean and delight in exploration. The game truly feels like it cares about these topics, and regardless of success, the developers work their hearts out trying to chase an almost impossible goal. And it turns out that that's enough. Because as someone who shares that love, I still found this game incredibly touching for no other reason than the fact that it captured that emotion and I just got to stew in it. On paper, Beyond Blue doesn't do anything remarkably special, but despite everything I just said about how it falls short of a true diving experience, it's still the closest thing I've ever found to imparting the emotions of a dive, short of the act itself. So what the heck is going on here?
We dove so often, the memories all run together. Except one. When I wished I could stay down forever.
That was the short answer, but the longer and wordier one is a mastery of tone. This game is enjoyable less as a riveting gameplay loop and more as a place to just vibe out in. And it successfully sets up that vibe through a combination of dialogue, writing, and performances that got me into just the right mindset to enjoy everything else. Beyond Blue follows a trio of scientists in the West Pacific. Mirai, who you just got introduced to, specializes in whales, and she spends the game tracking one specific pod of them that she's been following for years. And then, naturally, some light adversity happens, and a pretty standard story about the cost industry extracts from nature ensues. But despite being a straightforward and simple narrative, it's still a really well-executed one, and has some standout moments. It's been a while since I've played a game that's gotten me to care about its characters as quickly as Beyond Blue did. Sometimes it was even as simple as a single, really well-delivered monologue.
We all figured that the population was going to collapse, and eventually it did. but seeing this large man spend day after day carrying tiny turtles from the nest to the water, it inspired us to stay.
And I think that largely comes down to the dialogue. The main trio of scientists banter and bicker, but in the moments where they come together, they have this subdued but implicit way of supporting each other that feels human in a way few games really capture. Dialogue in this game is just delivered differently.
Right, you know that no chatter rule is just for the vent area, right?
I'm sorry?
I think he's pointing out that you seem distracted.
Sorry. I'm back. Talk to me about something positive, Andre. Were you able to make contact with the teenagers you were telling me about?
Of course, it also helps that the narrative is supported by a series of documentary-style videos you unlock after every dive that I highly recommend you take the time to watch. They're only a few minutes long, and they do wonders for setting the tone for the rest of the game. They explore a lot of the methods different scientists use to explore the ocean, give a little more background detail about some of the environments you swim through in the game, and most importantly, capture the human side of these scientists and the passion they have for their jobs. Between these videos and the main narrative, Beyond Blue punches well above its weight class in emotional payoff. What's less effective is the gameplay itself, which is pretty bare bones. Beyond Blue throws you into a series of little sandboxes and then gives you a breadcrumb trail of waypoint markers to go follow. The game is basically structured as a series of fetch quests. Go here, find this tag, take snapshots of these 5 dolphins, go to the next waypoint, and so on. But just like in real diving, the game is at its best when you're out exploring instead of following these waypoint markers. It's understandable why the game would need the markers in these big open areas, especially when some of the objectives are only a few pixels large, but it's also easy to fall into a brainless rhythm where you flit from waypoint to waypoint, checking off your list of whales and dolphins to go scan. It's far more fun to do as the divers do and lazily drift along a shelf, stopping for a second to check out every little sea creature you find on the way to your main objective. And at no point is this exhibited better than in my favorite mission, which removes the waypoints entirely and directs you to explore a series of crevices. It's an entirely linear mission, but even so, just removing the waypoints and forcing you to look around for your objectives injected the game with some much-needed life that I wish other missions replicated better. To its credit, the game does try to do this with the other missions by giving you a log of fish to go hunt down and scan in each environment, most of which are off the beaten path, but those side tasks can overshoot into tedium when you're trying to hunt down 20 of the exact same fish with the exact same animations that could exist anywhere in 3 different maps, and that's just not worth your time. For the most part, the most interesting thing you can do on many of these maps is just look at stuff. Which, to be fair, that's exactly all most diving is. Looking at cool stuff. So you would hope that there would be a lot of really interesting stuff to look at, and for the most part, Beyond Blue delivers. This is a good-looking game, especially for an indie studio, and the game will throw more whales, dolphins, sharks, and orcas at you over the course of a few hours than most divers will likely see in their entire lives, so there's no shortage of interesting things to look at. In particular, I enjoyed the fact that they revisited locations at different times because night diving is absolutely gorgeous. But all of it seems built more for ambiance, and if you look too closely at anything, you'll watch most fish loop through idle animations or see a pod of whales do the exact same flip within 3 seconds of each other. For a game primarily about looking at things, Beyond Blue really would have benefited a lot from a few extra animations for its fish to randomly switch between. As they are, you're not going to want to stop for long, and you'll be heading back to those waypoints and progressing onto the next level pretty quickly. But speaking of progress, it's time to ask the big question. What do you get out of 5 hours with Beyond Blue? I saw the credits within 3.5 hours, so the answer is everything. If you skip the documentary videos and stick strictly to the critical path, you might shave a half hour off. And if you really want to 100% the game, you can replay levels to hunt down and tag every fish in the sea, but I really don't recommend either course of action. If you want to get the most out of the game, I'd recommend that you let yourself wander when you feel like it, but don't dawdle too long unless you're really enjoying the ambiance. That's more or less what I did, and I overall came away really happy with my experience. Beyond Blue is an incredibly niche game, but as someone who falls squarely into that niche, I absolutely loved my time with it. And while I might ding the game for its animations or dead simple gameplay, I really can't go on enough about what a respectful work of passion and love this game feels like. This is a game that is genuinely excited about its subject matter, and the way that excitement bleeds through its every pore is an X-factor that uplifts the entire experience. I absolutely loved my time with this one, and if you have any interest in its subject matter, you probably will too. Hey guys, if you like what you're seeing here, consider supporting me on Patreon. With your generous support, I can start doing all kinds of cool stuff like more in-depth video essays and 5-hour streams where I review games like this in real time. So if any of that sounds cool, please consider becoming a patron today. But I hope you enjoyed this first 5 review. Thanks for watching this far, and I'll see you all next week.